This is the second class of a 6-week course, Celebration of Failure. My name is Tony Dingman. I'm the program coordinator at the main library. Let me introduce you to Larry Horn. He is the executive director of Amplify Louisville. Amplify Louisville is cultivating an inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem by galvanizing our active network to provide diverse programming and direct access to talent, customers, and capital to strengthen the area's innovation economy. Most recently, Larry was the director of startup ecosystem development for Louisville through Techstars. He has an MBA from the University of Louisville and is the co-founder of T&G Pharmaceuticals, Liberate Medical, Derby City Cut and Sew, and Roth River. He is inspired to help entrepreneurs and small businesses be successful. And he does this by participating as the board chair of Venture Connectors, board chair of Lemonade Day Louisville, advisory board member of Canopy, annual giving committee chair for the University of Louisville Alumni Association, board of advisors. That's a lot of words. And as he says, countless coffee and bourbon meetings with fellow entrepreneurs. It's all you, Larry.
All right. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. Sorry that we cannot be in person together tonight. I hope you're all safe and warm wherever you are. Excited to have the opportunity to talk to all of you about failing forward in that process in business. I'm joined tonight by three of my favorite people, Dion Stokes, who is the CEO and founder of The Failure Report. Kela Ivonye, who is the CEO and founder of Protege, also works as an entrepreneur in residence for Amplify. And then the lovely Kiana Baker, who is the co-founder of The Elephant in the Room and also works as a director of community engagement for Amplify as well. So I'm happy to have all three of them with me tonight. The thing, as Tony mentioned, what I'd love to do is make this as conversational as possible. And then, if you have a chance, just throw them in the chat, chime in, we'll stop, we'll read the question or maybe bring you up to add it. I will have some questions in the presentation as we go. So first I'm going to do the awkward thing of try to share my screen and hopefully not mess up the technology piece of that. So give me 1 second, please. We're good? All right, thanks. Okay, again, so it's such a pleasure to be here and to do this work with the Louisville Free Public Library. I mean, we're really blessed to have such an incredible institution in our city that provides so much programming and educational access for everybody in our community. This slide might be moot at this point. I think that Tony did a great job reading off my bio. I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of the crazy person that's talking to you for a little bit. But, as Tony mentioned, I'm a 4-time founder, and I've spent a lot of my time kind of really leaning in and investing my time into civic engagement in a variety of different ways, mostly focused on entrepreneurship and economic development. But as we talked about Amplify Louisville, our mission is we are inspired to make essential resources available to all founders, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Our organization began in July of 2020, and we are a state-funded program by Kentucky Innovation, which is through the Cabinet of Economic Development. And I want to share a little bit about the work that we do. Because I think this is something that people don't realize, that we are also a free resource that is provided by the state. And we focus on tech-enabled scalable startups. And to give you a sense, this is some of the work that we've done over just in 21, where myself and our team members, which includes Kela and Kiana, we have met with over 1,000 different founders and made over 1,500 connections for those founders. We put on programs and events that have hosted over thousands of founders and entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. And a big piece of what we do is I like to refer to as community quarterback. And that is help navigate the community in the best way we can. We do that with a lead, partner, and support mentality, which allows us to partner and support and supercharge other organizations. So in the year of 21, we spent approximately 40% of our budget really just supporting other organizations in the community that are already doing the great work to help founders. And our main outcome and goal for Amplify is to create a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the data shows once you have a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem, that supports corporates, Main Street, everyone, because you're hiring folks. As we all know, 80% of new jobs come from starting a new businesses. And that's the one thing that Amplify is very much focused on. So why is talking about failure important? I think that, when Tony and I first started talking about the idea of this is something that has been a passion project of mine of talking to founders and anyone about the value of failing forward. And as I kind of list here, failure is inevitable. And, quite frankly, it's necessary to grow your business, but it's also necessary to grow yourself as a person. I know we're going to focus a little bit more on business today, but I'm really excited about this series of programs. So I wanted to kind of take through a little bit of a journey of talking about the background of failure. First, first as we talk about fail forward, I love this quote: "You will either step forward into growth or you will backward into safety." And that failure is the opposite, is not the opposite of success, but it's a part of success. We often talk about, and I think before we all jumped on the call, we were chatting about the idea of a growth mindset, being open to the idea of those challenges and failures. And often we benefit from those greatest failures. And what is your mindset? Do you choose to see this as something that's a negative, that's something that is you've done wrong, or can you see this as an opportunity to move forward? So I think that's the importance of thinking about what fail forward really is. So what we're going to talk about, essentially, again, we're going to talk a lot about failure, how it's valuable, how businesses take that and grow from it. We're going to talk about the impact of it, and then lastly, we're going to have our panel discussion with our panelists that we introduced earlier. Now, I'm going to try to do, again, technology is our friend. I'm going to show you a little video that you may have seen that I think is a perfect example of what failure looks like and what happened and what could potentially have happened after this. So let me share this with you. All right. I don't know if anyone has seen this before. It's really hard, but I can't see anyone or hear anyone, but.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take a look.
Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click.
So I think we can see, in moments, especially as we are continuing to work through Zoom and the different efforts of our pandemic, that failure will continue to happen, and it's how we can actually deal with it. Now, I know my screen looks a little bit different now, but I hope that's okay for the group. Let's see, we already got someone in the chat.
Oh, that was me, Larry. Sorry.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And I think Tony had shared this out. These are some questions that I wanted to ask of the group. And Tony, I don't know if we've got the polls together yet, but I was really curious of everyone that's on the call today, how many of you have started your own business? And if so, how many of those businesses are still going or still operating? If anyone, I think, thank you, Tony, for pulling that up. It looks like we've had at least 4 people try to start a business. They're still in business, 3 of the 15. And you so see the 5. So that is, hopefully you took that and you learned forward. You learned from what may have created the business to go out of business and be able to learn from that and continue to move forward. And if anybody would like to throw in the chat eventually what kind of businesses they ran, I'd love to talk about that process as we go along. So as we move forward, the one thing is, again, I like to talk to founders about and talk around about is this idea that failure somehow is just considered to be something negative. And I have the picture of the baby walking because, for when we're all younger, we think about a toddler starting to walk or starting to talk, and they fail miserably. And I think we continue to encourage them, we continue to support them, and our expectation is they will continue to get better and build upon what they are. Instead of avoiding it, I mean, imagine if we all said, okay, you can't take that first step, let's go ahead and strap you in to the carriage for the rest of your life. So it's again, that growth mindset that shifts and talks about, supporting individuals and supporting their ability to fail forward and support them in that journey. Now, this next slide was a little bit hard for me because, again, I think that it's hard to talk about failure even for myself. But I figured, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to put some things out there. First, I love Rocky Balboa. I mean, how do you not? But this is the motto that I have and I share with others. It's not how often we get hit, but how many times we can get up and keep moving forward. And so my own failure journey started many times. I often joke, I went to school long enough to be a doctor, but I was not a doctor. I've moved to cities and lost a job because I found out I didn't actually graduate when I thought I did. You can kind of see here, I've had some successes. I've won a global business plan competition prize. I started a company, but I had to replace myself, got divorced, started an unsuccessful consulting business, on and on. Until every moment and every turn, I took that opportunity to think about what can I do to improve whatever caused that lack of success, and continue to build upon that and know better for the next time. It never discouraged me. I kept moving forward. I once heard one of our successful entrepreneurs in town say, being that mindset, that growth mindset of an entrepreneur is like beating your head on the ground over and over again, thinking you're eventually going to break the road. But all of this to be said, in my mind, I always try to build new things and make it fail as fast as possible. So I know I can either stop it or move on to something else or make it better. And I think that's a key point that we try to communicate to our community and to our founders at Amplify. But I'm not alone, right? We have several historical figures that have talked about failure and learned from failure. We often hear about Thomas Edison and his 10,000 ways that won't work. That's a great growth mindset. One that I didn't actually know until I was doing some research, but is Jack Ma, co-founder of Alibaba. Last I heard, richest man in the world, failed preschool, failed all these different initiatives, but continued forward. And then reading a little bit more about him, would take each one of those pieces and again apply it to his next venture. And then, one of my most favorite examples is Abraham Lincoln. We often, growing up, we hear about him being as president and all the amazing things that he did as president. But what you don't learn until later is the challenges that he went through before he became president. You can kind of see here in this image, 30 years before he became president, he failed more often than he won, but he kept being persistent and persevered through the process to eventually become elected and be one of the greatest presidents that we've had. And as I said up here, he's kind of a big deal. So again, I'd love to, if anyone on the call, the four of you that started a business or tried, if you would like to share anything about your business or the failure and what you learned, I'd love to hear from you if you'd be interested in sharing with the group.
And you can, if you want, you can raise your hand. There's a little button down there to raise your hand, or you can put something in a chat as well.
All right, no takers today. Right now, that's okay. So again, I know we're going to have a chance to talk with Kela and Kiana and Dion, where we're going to, and I will also be able to share some of those individual business failures. And sometimes when we think about business failure, it's not just the business itself closes. We think about a lot of that in the founder community because typically your whole business closes when that gets to that place. But very often it's the product that you build. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The products you build, or the person you might hire, or some other activity in the business that may be seen as failure, but you learn better for that next time. So, some of this, just talking about failure, I think is really important. And again, I have this idea in my mind where a lot of success comes from experience and exposure to different activities and different things, most likely that did not work or win. And again, failure is only the opportunity to begin again, and only this time more wisely. How do we take that again and move that forward? It creates these experiences so you can enjoy life wonders instead of the fear that may keep you from building that. And then character. I think that, famous John Wooden quote, the true test of a person's character is what he does when no one is watching. I think that we see this often is as failure. How do you react when failure happens? Especially when it's very lonely in a startup. You're usually sometimes the only employee or the only person working on it. Is how does that build your character? And building that character, how does those qualities support, the forward piece of being able to continue to build through the tough times? Because building your business is always going to be challenging. There's always going to be struggles. There's always going to be failures. But I think that character is the one that will help you forge through. Oh, and yeah, thank you, Kela. Yeah, I was using that as, do it like this. Oh, sorry, guys. Let me get back to this here. Okay, there we go. So the other piece of this that I think is really interesting, and this is something that we're seeing a little bit through the pandemic, which is the creativity that is sparked from failures. We think about right now, and this has been consistent over time, in which that during times of pandemic or times of crisis like war, some of the most innovative products, ideas, or companies are born. And a lot of this is the failure of not being able to do what you would normally do in the business community because of that existing issue like the pandemic. And so I think that understanding that those failures will force you to invent new ideas, be creative, pivot. You may never experience that unless there was some sort of failure or some sort of suffering. And I always love the term creative destruction. And this refers to the idea as you're innovating, as you're pivoting, you will create something that will be better than what has come before you and may no longer be relevant after that. Keep checking the chats. Thank you, Mark. No, that's great. Mark in the chat talks about he started a radio program interviewing community changers, but I funded it myself during a time of unemployment for nearly a year until I was in unemployment. I think it absolutely counts. And I'm sure during that time while you were talking with other these community changers that you're mentioning, they gave you some inspiration or learned from some of the processes they went through. And Tony, I think you see one from Tony. I didn't see that earlier. I'm sorry. Tony I was a marketing consultant and your company was Tonic Marketing and you stopped your consulting to go back to the agency side. That often happens. I know, as I mentioned earlier, I had a consulting business, which I jokingly now refer to as part-time unemployment. And it was a learning experience that led me back to working for a regular corporation. But going back and just to kind of continuing to leverage on this idea of failure is the building blocks to continue to be successful. And it's not one failure and you're good. It's usually 1,000 little failures, maybe some big ones in there too, that help you and continue to move. I love this graphic on the right, or at least my right, that shows those different pieces. I think I've probably experienced that sometimes all in one day. But I think that's an important thing to keep going, is you have to keep going, keep building, and keep failing forward. Oh, sorry guys, wrong way. So I wanted to start talking a little bit about famous product failures. And these come from large corporations or companies that, oh shucks, I'm sorry guys, that invested lots of money. They have tons of talent. They have lots of energy around this. And this was an example in 1957, the Ford Edsel. Ford had spent over $400 million into investing in this product at a time when the country was going to smaller, more compact cars that were fuel efficient. This car lasted on the market for about 3 years. And so I still have memories of my parents or grandparents talking about the car. They loved it, but they missed the wave of what the community or what the society was looking for. And this was a fun process to go through and think about and find all the kind of different product failures. This is the one that I always use. Maybe it's because of the age that I am, but is the Betamax. I had a Betamax. And it was a superior product to VHS. What Betamax did not do well is they did not open source their technology, so no one could really build. You could only play Sony Beta tapes, where the VHS allowed other studios and places to be able to make films and put it on their cassette. I think this lasted, if I remember right, about 3 or 4 years before they shelved the Betamax, still known as superior quality, but they missed the mark. And that was a big failure for Sony at the time. You can't go without talking about some of the famous sodas. I remember New Coke. I remember it came out. It came out for about a year. It gave Coke the opportunity to now begin to have Coca-Cola Classic, which some like to refer to as a marketing stunt or ploy. But either way, they invested a lot of money into the Coke rebrand without success. And then Pepsi is no stranger to this as well. I remember Crystal Pepsi, but to be quite honest, I do not remember Pepsi AM. And when I was reading about this, it was the cola beverage for breakfast people. Pepsi AM and Crystal Pepsi both stayed on the market only for 1 year. I think this is another example of a superior technology product, but had missed the wave of the existing product, which was the the iPod. So in 2006, Microsoft releases the Zune. Everyone felt like it held more songs, it had better audio quality, but of course it did not last long. I think it was on the shelves for about 2 years. And fun fact, you can still buy one on eBay if that is anything that you're interested in being able to check out from a famous product failure. This one's personally for me. I was so excited when I first heard about mobile ESPN. You know, they would play the famous Sports Center dun-dun-dun sound when it rang. And this, it just didn't take off. And they sold this to Verizon about a year after they launched it. And then, of course, very close after that, the smartphone came out, which made getting customized or curated content directly to your phone from ESPN made obsolete, because you could just go to ESPN's website and check it out. And then to kind of end on some of these products is the 2014 Amazon Fire Phone. Again, this is to compete against the iPhone. I feel like a lot of companies, as we can tell, are chasing Apple when it comes to a lot of those products. And this was, again, a product that did not stay on the shelf very long. It was shelved, I think, if I remember, after 1.5 or 2 years. And Amazon completely stayed out of the phone business after that point. Very similar, reminds me of, I don't have this slide, but it reminds me of when Barnes & Noble introduced the Nook, which was a competitor to the Kindle or to an e-reader from Amazon. And it also just did not take off. But I think the important thing about the Amazon Fire Phone is this quote I found from Jeffrey Bezos. And it's the idea that the size of your failures isn't growing. You're not going to be inventing at a size that can actually move the needle. And so as your company gets larger, your risks have to be much larger. And the thing he says, which I found really interesting, is that he believes multi-billion-dollar failures are actually a good thing for Apple. Now, these three things aren't failures, but these are examples of enormous investments by Amazon to try to move the needle forward for their business, understanding it might fail and still having the courage to go forward with it. So I thought that was really great. As someone that probably gets, an Amazon package on his door every day, I think there's a lot of good wisdom from that from Bezos. So again, an opportunity to kind of chime in if anyone's interested. I'd love to hear any kind of product failures that you may know about. I know often it's like, I'm like, whatever happened to X, Y, or Z? So if you would like to share, if you would like to share that, please let me know. I'm trying to get the chat up. There we go. If anyone has a famous product that they would love to share, a product failure that they recognize and kind of wondered what may have happened. And Mark, thank you for that additional note. Okay, well, again, E.T. the video game. There you go. That's a good one. There was another one I saw from Nintendo that was VR set in the 90s, but obviously they were way ahead of their time. A lot of the product failures, if you go back and do the research, are really just being ahead of the market, too far ahead where you can't get that early adoption. So it's been interesting to see some of these companies that have failed on a product, but iterate and then release something different down the road, which was kind of the their fail forward moment. All right. Well, that was my kind of wanted to take you all through a little bit of the different ways of failing forwards, the way businesses have handled this, both as the organization or the founder, but also some of the products. But what I'd really like to do now is get a chance to chat with my friends, talk around these failures that they've experienced both in their own work and the work they do. So as you can see, serial entrepreneurs, failure evangelists, and success stories. So I'm going to unshare my screen for a moment, and I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So Kiana, if you wouldn't mind, if you could start us off with an introduction of yourself, and we'll move on to Dion and then Kela.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Kiana Baker. I am Director of Community Engagement at Amplify Louisville, also co-founder of the Elephant in the Room, which is a DEI company that does diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops in corporations to help mitigate biases in the workplace. And I'm very happy to be here today and talk about failure. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Kiana. Miss Dion.
I am so excited about being here tonight. I am Dion Stokes. I am a 5X founder. And with that title comes a lot of failure. So I started a podcast a few years ago called The Failure Report, because just like individuals practice gratitude, I write a failure report every single day, because I believe with my whole heart that failures happen for us and not to us. And the moment that I can actually recognize why the failure happened for my good, why the setback happened for my setup, I am able to move forward faster. And so I'm super excited about being here to share all of my failures. And I love Kela because we just went over some statistics about him. I'm throwing the ball to him right now on the introduction, because he was on The Failure Report, which is an amazing podcast. If you guys do not stream it, you guys can stream it on all popular podcast platforms. But his podcast is number 4 on my podcast streaming platform, because it was amazing. You can't be successful without failing at least once or twice. So I'm tossing the ball to Kela. Please introduce yourself. Make sure you unmute your mic. We can't hear you. I knew he was going to do it. I said unmute your mic. There he goes.
Nice. Boom. Larry, I don't know what you did having me after Dion. She's amazing. And I can't even keep up with the energy. But I'm going to take what she's passed on and I'm going to work with that. Excited to be here with you guys, Larry, Kiana, who I work with, Tony, and everyone that's here. It's exciting to have you guys here so we can share our stories. My name is Kela Ivonye. I am currently an entrepreneur in residence at Amplify Louisville, which just means I work at Amplify, helping other founders succeed while I work on my own project. So I'm a founder of Protege, which is an organization that connects Black founders with successful founders who've sold their companies for 100 million and above, for mentorship and sponsorship. The idea is we feel that networks and connections are not evenly distributed. And one thing I learned in my first failure was I didn't have a strong network, right? And I'll talk more about it. And so that really led me, that failure shone light on a problem that I'm solving right now. My last company was Millhaven, and it was acquired, but I've also failed several times in other companies. So happy to be here with you all. Should be a blast.
Yeah, thank you, Kela. I really appreciate it. And I am excited. This crowd's definitely going to bring the energy for today. So again, I think, and one of the reasons I is so excited the three of you joined is because you are very honest and open about the failures that you've experienced and how you help others with it. So, I mean, really the first one's kind of a little bit of a layup softball question. Let's talk about a time that one of your businesses failed. How'd you deal with it? What did you learn? Dion, I will start with you. If you'd like to share kind of, some of your experiences, 5-time founder, I'm sure that came with a lot of bumps and bruises.
Yeah, it has. But I started my professional career in politics, and right out of college, I was a volunteer for a politician and worked with him for many, many years, all from city council through US Congress. And in between that, I worked with about 15 different individuals who were running for politics. So I wish I could announce that I won them all, but I lost them. And with that was my first introduction at like a really ripe age of about 23 of what it felt like to fail when someone's paying you a lot of money to succeed. And I used what I learned there to work in marketing, in PR, and the opportunity to fail really became something that I had to adopt really quickly. Because it was going to happen. And I learned that so early on. With my very first campaign that I ran was being a failure. And from that point on, it really catapulted me into loving the idea of what am I going to learn from this moment? How am I going to take some really key points away from this and make myself a better person? And really all that it's done is created the opportunities that I've experienced today. I wish my initial thought was to say success, but success is a mindset that I struggle with a little bit because we tie certain dollar amounts to success. We tie certain ambitions and house size and square footage and cars in the parking lot to success, right? And so, or views and Kela's, because you can, y'all look at that. I had to pick at you because you're my friend. Like, we're all friends on here. I'm sorry you guys are on a personal conversation, but I attach those things to success. So for that reason, what does that look like for you? And it varies for different individuals. But the thing that made me start the failure report, which is something that I absolutely love, is one day I left a business meeting with a business partner. I was a consultant, and I'm going to say I see a lot of similarities in people doing consulting work and then exiting with like a failure situation. I don't know what happens there, but I was in a partnership with a gentleman, and we had our whole stick down. We had our pitch down. We were going into this great meeting. We flew out to Colorado for the day, and we were going to leave with $350,000 in pocket as like good earnest money. And after that, we were signing a 5-year contract. We had the numbers are still like just like fresh, right? And I remember walking into this meeting and telling him, like, don't speak unless spoken to. Like, I remember us having, because he would just say things that I was like, why are you making us sound larger than we are, or bigger than we are, or better than we are? And needless to say, we didn't end up living with that $350,000. And what's also amazing is that the company didn't actually put us up in the hotel they were supposed to. They canceled their reservation, so we had to fly out that same day. Imagine how hard it is to get a flight from Denver to Louisville, okay, which is not happening on a direct flight. So because of the time difference and all those things, we ended up spending the night in the airport. And after like completely submerging myself in bourbon, I remember writing out the full business plan for the failure report, because this was not the first time. This was not the 5th time. This was numerous times that I realized that we were in a failing business. I tried. I pivoted. We wrote another business plans and it was not working. And I realized that this was happening for me and there was a lesson I needed to learn. And so I took that opportunity, not just to start the podcast, but to continue. At that point, I was probably about a 2 or 3x founder. I took that opportunity to really dig my heels in deep and say, you know what? I actually like the way this feels. I can learn something from this. And in the meantime, I can help others with that.
Right.
So I realized I had that as an opportunity for me. So that's my claim to failure fame. If there ever was one.
Well, definitely love how you've taken that, and obviously, writing the business plan for the failure report after that is a perfect example of taking something and making it better and moving on to the next piece.
Yeah.
So thank you. Kiana, would you like to share a little bit of some of your bumps and bruises and things in your journey?
Absolutely. So my first taste of what would be considered failure was also with a startup that was not my own, but as employee number 2, it felt like it was mine. And okay, so there's a question in the chat, and I'm gonna tell you what the question is because it's relevant to my failure story. Are there certain things to look for to know when it is time to move on from a project? And there's a question before that, but we'll get to that in due time.
I'll pull that one in, yeah.
But it's relevant because I'm working for this particular startup. We open location number 2. It's like a big deal because we are spilling over with people in this space. Like, we're running out of space. We're having to put people on a wait list, all these things. And we find location number 2. It's perfect. And as employee number 2, I was tasked with building out this space and filling it up by myself. So I'm in charge of contractors, designing the space, getting the space filled up, all the things. And COVID hit. Oh. And so it's like, all right, we're fine, we're good. We'll focus on building the space out, right? It's perfect. No one wants to be in there. We don't have to rush. We can't have people in this space. It's the perfect time for contractors to build out a space. And then the contractors call and they're like, so we're going to take the month off because half of our team has COVID, so we can't function anyway. Right. We're like, all right, yep, it's fine. It's fine. But mind you, this is money. So we're losing money because we're not making any money. And finally we get out of lockdown and I'm trying to get people in the space. The one thing that nobody wants to do is be around other people, especially people they don't know. And it was like this big weight on everyone's shoulders because it's like, if we want to stay open, we need to fill this space. That's it. Like, that is the equation. Get people in the space so we can pay the bills and keep the doors open. And there just came a point where it was like, all right, there's an ultimatum. Either you keep trying to fill this space up and you're losing money, and ultimately you're going to end up losing your team. Or do you focus on the one space that you know it already exists, it already has people who are committed to being there, who need a work from home space outside of their children who are at home, all the things. And so we choose to close down, but then the landlord's like, okay, but you have 2 weeks. And so we're like, all right. And our team, we just hustled and bustled, put all the furniture in a U-Haul, and we were like back and forth between spaces. But I remember everyone going, oh my gosh, I'm just so sorry that this happened to you all. I'm so sorry. And our team was like, thank goodness this place is shutting down. We could not wait to have what felt like a burden off of our hands. We're like, no, it is fine. It's the best thing that ever happened to us. It freed up money, time. It saved our team, so our team didn't have to lose jobs during COVID. I was able to focus on the things that I did best as a part of the team, as opposed to coming in every day losing hair over whether or not I was going to be able to keep this location open. And it ended up being great. And I think that sometimes you really have to keep in mind what your ultimate goal is. What are the values of your company that you own, that you're helping to start up? And that ultimately will help you make those tough decisions that could seem like failures, but ultimately work for your good.
And, I'm sure you learned a lot from that experience, and how to do it different, better, whatever going forward. I definitely want to come back to that question around knowing when it's time to park, because I think that we've all had an experience with like hanging on too long because we don't want to be seen as failures, when really by doing that, we failed harder. So thank you, Kiana. Kela, my man, talk about some of your experiences with the different organizations that you've been a part of and that you've helped build. Hope you're on mute again, buddy.
It's just gonna happen every time. Okay, just remind me. Sorry. So I think I've registered 3 organizations as LLC, as corporations, right? So these are companies that I started that I felt were going to go the venture route. We're going to raise venture dollars or startups. We're going to scale and we're going to get oversized returns, right? Like, so my first company was a food delivery startup. This was right after college. I dropped out of grad school. And I started because I really couldn't find a job or anything else to do, right? So it's not like I just had this brilliant idea that I'm going to start this. It was out of necessity. And so I started a food delivery company. We were getting good traction. It was out of Louisville. This was back in 2013 or so. So this is before Uber and all of that. And we still had like the capability for you to track and see where your food is. The same thing that Uber kind of does, but not their technology, obviously. So we did a couple $100,000s in revenue. I think our first going into the first 2 years, it seemed like things were just not moving fast enough, right? Like we were seeing growth, and small growth's not enough for a startup company, right? You want to see over 15% month-over-month growth, or even larger than that. And our growth wasn't just reaching there. We applied to several accelerators. This is one I'm wearing, actually, 500 startups. We didn't get into it, right? I didn't have a strong technical team. I just had my drive, and I just was going out to do it. And so because of that, what we built was not necessarily valuable because we didn't have a strong technical team. So fast forward, later on, a lot of things just happened in my life and it just doesn't work out. We're unable to raise funding, right? Like, so we're going to VCs trying to raise funding and we're just unable to raise funding. And at some point, that thought starts coming out like, well, why am I not raising? What's wrong with me? You start reading all these news on TechCrunch or Business First Louisville, on, just several places of all these people raising, and you're like, and you're like, what's the issue, right? And that was how I felt. I was like, why am I not able to do this? Is it this reason? Is it that reason? But one thing that happened for me was I was able to go back, right, to look at the reason for not raising, an absence of network. And I'll come back to that. And so the company, I saw there wasn't a growth. I decided that we're going to shut down, right? We're not raising money. It was just, a lot of things weren't working out. And so we decided that I was going to shut down. We had metrics and I didn't reach it, right? I think the question is like, at what point do you decide that you want to shut down? The founder of Twitch, Justin Kahn, says, usually when you start something, have 18 months that if I don't reach this, I'm going to shut down, right? And then you might have another 6-month buffer that, okay, if I don't reach this, but I've reached a certain percentage of it, we're going to give it a try, right? So you're able to go back and look at it. And that for us, after we saw that it wasn't working out, I decided to shut down. But while we were shutting down, I started looking for who could buy us, right? There were no big tech companies in Louisville that did delivery, right? There was no Uber Eats, there was no Grubhub, there was nothing. And so I started reaching out to all these CEOs, right? Because I wanted to transform my failure into something. Reach out to all the CEOs and kept on hustling. And fortunately, one of them said, hey, we'll give you whatever pennies on the dollars or whatever on your contracts with different restaurants, which was how, a company called Topingo, which is how Grubhub then came to Louisville, right? And so we shut down. I was able to get that and I was able to get that outcome. But what I did was I realized that my network was not strong enough, right? I didn't know enough people. I didn't get enough vote awards, right? Applied to the vote awards, I didn't get in there. And so what I started doing is seeing who are the stakeholders that I really admired. They were doing things in Louisville, and I started reaching out to them and giving my time for free, right? So volunteering to them, saying, hey, what can I do? And it was one of them that said, hey, well, dude, you failed at your company. I know you don't want to work at another company. Why don't you come over here and build your next company? And so that allowed me to start that next company. And that's also how I met Larry, who I now work with, right? It's true taking action at that failure of going to expand my network. And so I started my next company. The next company was inspired by the last company. It was food delivery. And I noticed that delivery people would wait at the door so long to get to leave a delivery. And so I created a smart mailbox that could receive your packages or your delivery on your behalf, right? So now fast forward years from now, I had built a great network. We applied to 500 startups and I got in, and but I knew what was missing. And so I had a strong technical founder that I recruited, and he went to MIT. And so when you have failures, you're able to look back and say, what are those things? And really, because they catapult you to the next stage, right? It really is in your failures that you find out what is that missing or secret sauce that you didn't have, right? And what do you need to do to go find it? And so really for me, like it taught me to build my network, and now I work trying to help other people build their network and build enough network that I can share.
And now you coach and mentor people that go through Vote, the same
Yes.
group that did not let you in before.
Yes, exactly.
100%.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kela, I love it. And for those of you that heard Dion talk about this earlier, she interviews Kela on her podcast, and Kela has a terrific story of both his personal and professional journey that's been filled with a lot of roadblocks. So thank you for that. Says, just before we switch to the next question, Dion, Kiana, do you guys want to have any follow-up comments to anything each of you may have said?
Oh, no, I'm ready to get into some of these questions that we have coming in through the chat. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, gotcha. Perfect. Well, I do want to go back to the one thing that Kiana kind of pulled into hers for a second, and that is, when do you know it's time to leave? Again, as I think I mentioned a moment ago, I know I've struggled with this quite often, of like leaving things going too long because I didn't want to seem as a failure. I wasn't good enough. Like, oh, maybe I am an imposter. I shouldn't be here. Could you talk a little bit about, and Kiana, I know you talked about this a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about like what has been a time in which you had, and Kela mentioned like, all right, I know in 18 months I'm going to be done. But Kela, if you're still, I know you're still with us for a few more minutes. I actually let you go first on this one. Can you think about, you mentioned about the 18 months process before, can you talk about the mental shift you have when you're coaching, because you coach and mentor as much as build your own things now, of helping founders or other business leaders know when it's time to go?
Yeah, so your question is like, how do I know when to tell them that, look, this is not working out?
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's see. Yeah, I think so let's see. So in a case, it's really, because I work with the founders, and when I work with founders through Amplify, and you guys can check it out and sign up for it. I work with founders through our organization that Larry quarterbacks. Thank you, Larry. And really, when they come in, we start, if we get to work with that founder, right? We work with them hands on hand from the first stage to whatever you're doing. So what I do is I try to give them a metric, and I say, hey, what is that most important metric or KPI that you need to work on, right? And so I start monitoring that, right? And I think for me, I have an actual situation where the founder just didn't care about the metric, right? Like the founder just kept on thinking, hey, well, what about this other thing, this other thing, this other thing? And so for me, it was like, look, if you're not growing, right? Like if growth is that metric that you need and you're unable to reach that, and you don't know any way that you should get it, then that's when you need to start thinking about it, right? Like, so maybe you're building a social media tool. Growth is important, right? Like nothing else matters more than growth and engagement, right? If it's something like food delivery, the dollars don't increase unless more people order. You can get to more people as there are more restaurants, right? And so in my personal case, it was just like we weren't growing enough restaurants, and so that was my cue. But really is saying what is your North Star at your company, or that KPI that you focus on, and if it's not moving enough, it's like you have to reevaluate, right? But I've never told a founder you should shut it down. These are decisions that I think that they should take themselves, so they don't hate me.
Yeah. No, great advice. Dion, how about you?
Oh, this is a really, really good question because, and I mentioned it briefly, I keep my failure report next to my gratitude journal because I feel as if they're one and the same. I feel like I'm grateful for the every single opportunity that I have to make a misstep or a failure. And we get so caught up, you know, like I love that Kela was talking about like those KPIs. When you look at what that key performance indicator is for you, then you're able to measure against, am I meeting that? I do a daily check-in on, are you doing it? Are you exceeding your expectations? Are you even meeting your expectations? Are you way behind? So if I'm way behind those expectations, I know the thing I need to do the next day in order to catch up, or the next month, and what kind of plan we need to make in order to make up the ground that we've lost over this time. And I love the questions that we have in the chat about this, because it really is one of those things where you're going to have to get in the mindset of saying, I am entering this with the idea that I'm going to make a mistake. I mean, we can call it what we want, but I call it a failure. You know, that's my F word of choice, right? But we can say that we're making a misstep, a mess up, a mishap, a boo-boo. But at the same time, what is it that I'm going to say that I'm looking for, so that I can know when I've met it, so I can know when to pivot? That's the only way that you're going to find real success. And, you know, Larry, you quoted Rocky Balboa, but I love to quote the good Mike Tyson, and he's saying, we all have a plan until we get punched in the mouth.
Yep. It's a good one.
When you get punched in the mouth, something happens and you're like, I wasn't expecting for you to hit me with that left foot the way you did. So, but you should have been looking for it. I should know when I start this business, these are the things that may happen. These are the barriers that I may meet. And when you are operating in that mindset, you're able to have an immediate answer for how I'm going to get around it, or if I can't get around it, which I know is what Kela and even Kiana do in the work that they do, is helping the community and helping individuals in that mentor program to understand this is how you know when you're meeting that poor expectation, or you're not meeting your deliverables, or you're failing, and how to move past that.
I love that. I love how you put it, Dion. It's almost like creating a budget for yourself. Yep. So it's like, most of us are not just mindlessly swiping and spending and swiping and spending and never looking at our bank accounts to even see if we have the money to spend, especially if you have a big purchase, right? You're looking at the bank account, keeping a budget, trying to make sure that you're not spending all the money all the time too fast, right? And when you get to a point where you check the bank account and you're a little close to zero, you start to make a change. And it's the same thing with your business, is once you're not meeting those certain metrics that you hit for yourself, you have to pivot, you make a change. So it's very similar to life in that sense.
I love that analogy. Absolutely.
I think it's interesting because, you know, we all, I think rationally can talk about like the metrics and like if we're not hitting it, but I still feel like there's this gnawing emotional, mental piece that keeps us from making that decision for sure. There was actually, there's a great question that we'll bring up that kind of that will lead into that, but there's been a couple of questions around not only how do you support your own ability to have a growth mindset, but maybe that of a partner or a boss or a co-founder, you know, that doesn't have that has a lot of fear of failure. You know, Kiana, I'll let you go first on this one. I mean, kind of this idea of like growth. By the way, for those, Kiana has one of the best growth mindsets of most people that I've ever met. Like, she is Mrs. Positive and like knows things how it's going to be. But anyways, I know if you could talk a little bit about some of the experiences that you've had with those that haven't and what you've done to kind of overcome or influence them in a different way.
I think it takes time to create a growth mindset. It starts with learning how to shift your perspective. So Dion spoke about this earlier. When you start taking kind of like that taboo and stigma out of what failure is, then it allows you to be a lot more open to what it can do for you, as opposed to just kind of soaking in that. So there's always something that you can get from failing. You're going to learn something. It's going to teach you what to do differently next time. It's going to help you with your personal growth. Once you can get past the fact that you failed, then it's going to allow you to not make the same mistake again. It's like a relationship. It's all these analogies.
Right.
It's like a relationship. And, you know, I do have a co-founder, and she is she's done a great job at her growth mindset now, years later. But I remember when we first started and we were working with a business coach, and she said, ultimately, what would you like to pay yourself? Like, if it was any number, what would you like to pay yourself? So me being the person that I am, I'm like, well, for my business, I would like to pay myself $250,000. And it got to my co-founder, and she was like, it would just be really nice if I could make $65,000. And I said, can you just make sure you put that number on her side? That is not my number.
It's not my story.
And here recently, we are preparing to scale, and she asked us the same thing. And first of all, my number went way up. And her number, she was like, you could put the same number down for me. And I remember her saying, in the beginning, I was just scared because I did not realize that what I couldn't see could actually be done. As opposed to me knowing myself, I know that like whatever number I put out there, I'm going to put in the work to do it. If we need to pivot, we will. If we have to start a whole other company, we will, but it will get done. And I think that someone had asked, when you face failure, what are some things you do to build your self-worth up? I think it starts with knowing yourself. So learning how to not attach your self-worth to your work, because your work can constantly be changing, right? Even if you can have a business that goes a completely different way than you expected, it can fail, it can, whatever you look at success to be, it could succeed. You could be working a full-time job and working on your business at the same time. It's constant. It's always going to be changing. And even when your business succeeds, it's learning how to detach, because who are you after that business is gone, right? Once you have worked yourself out of a job and maybe it gets acquired or whatever, who are you afterward? So learning how to know who you are outside of your, whatever it is that you're building, will definitely help you when it comes to failure, because you don't take it so personal.
Yeah.
I like that you kind of blended those two together, right? Because if you think about it, some of the fear of failure often is because they tie their personality or their person to products and business. Kela, I mean, with those kind of, that blended kind of mindset of both, how do you help with growth mindset for yourself or those around you? Could you share some of your experience with that?
Sure. I'll piggyback off what you said and what Kiana said, right? Like a lot of times we do everything to protect our image, right? Or create an image for ourselves, whether it's drive a fancy car, whether it's do our hair a certain way, whether it's hang out with certain people, right? We have an image that you want to keep, right? And so that kind of goes into, with your startup, right? You have that image and you feel your image is, I am Kela, the founder of Arrow Food Couriers, right? And you feel that taking that step to even start something, if it fails, that image is tarnished immediately, right? But even when you start, I think to go with what Kiana is saying, one of the athletes, right? They're one of the folks that face it a lot, right? Like where your image, you feel like you're an athlete, and then right after it, what's the next thing after life? Like what is the next thing after playing NBA or being in the NFL? What is that? And a lot of them face, no huge challenge. And so we know it's an issue. And so personally, what I started doing was I always introduced myself. Hi, I'm Kela, I'm a founder, right? Like that was it. Like I just wanted people to know that was who I am. And that was what defined me. That was what I felt defined me, right? I'm a founder that's going to reach this by this. This company's going to be valued at this. There's going to be this. But the truth is, I didn't know if that was really, what was it about me, right? Like I love building companies. I love creating that, but is that really what I am? And so I started not introducing myself as that, right? Like waiting later, right? And that was just a practical move for me to try to shift my own mindset personally, because that's not always what I'm thinking about. That's not always what I'm thinking about, right? And I think someone said something like, how do you, like, what else do you do, to feel better after that happens, right? When my food delivery startup ended, I think one thing that I noticed was my goals were not just to start a company, right? My goal was to start a company that could cut down emissions, that could be eco-friendly and stuff like that. And of course, give me a job, right? To feed myself. But what I realized that even though that didn't happen, the United Nations recognized me. So I was given an award by the United Nations as a champion for climate change. And so whenever that was the image that I just kept on remembering, I was like, oh, Arrow didn't fail. Like it didn't fail. Like these people recognize it. And this was a model that we start seeing other people do it. Delivery stopped going from city to city, from like all across cities and into smaller zones. And for me, I saw success, that what I wanted and the way I wanted the world to be, someone else was able to do that, right? Like I always say it, I will talk about my idea because if someone else better can do it, I'd love them to do it. And so I looked at that failure as not a failure. Someone else has brought that product to the world and it's making human lives better. I'm sorry I have to leave, guys, with that.
And on that, he drops the mic and takes off.
But you can check out my story on the failure report. I'm putting my email. You can reach out to me, share your stories or need some help or just whatever it is, reach out to us. We're here to support founders. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kela. Appreciate
it.
Dion, how about you? Take a crack at that one and share some of yours.
Yeah, and we're talking about how it is in that mindset whenever you are completely entangled in who you are and all and what your company is. And I heard a really amazing quote the other day that said that people buy BMWs and drive BMWs, not because they just really love the car, but it's because of what people think you are because you drive the car. Right. And so we introduce ourselves, as Kela just said, as these founders, because we like the idea of what it means behind that term. Our mindset had to completely shift to say, I am giving myself, and y'all understood what it meant to really be a founder. Look at Kiana, she's buckled over, okay? Because the glitz, the glam, the lights, it is not always what it seems in public. And what we have to always do is you have to remember why you started. And typically we start from a problem, right? Every good business is built from a problem. So remembering that problem and the solution that you offer is what keeps you really humble. And I think Kela touched on that beautifully before he hopped off, is that it became, I wanted to really work on admissions. I really wanted to do these things. If you're in that true growth mindset, you're going to find yourself being able to say, it's more than that. It's more than me. It's more than the dollar. It's more than the amount of podiums that I reach. It gets a little bit deeper than that. But I honestly believe that when you start setting realistic goals and really creating what real SMART goals look like for the growth of your business, you're able to find that you start in a vortex that gets much larger than just saying that I am a founder or that I am a failure. What am I going to do with this failure? We all have failures surrounding COVID, and I'm sure we could all sit and have a real big pity party over what it means to fail during COVID. And I know that my story personally with Joint Effort, which was my 16-year-old marketing company, was at its complete pinnacle. I was ready to almost retire. I had this dream of retiring before 40, and I was on track. Like, okay, I've got a second in command. We're doing this X amount of dollars. Like commas. I was completely on top of the world for what I considered on top of the world, right? And in between March 13th and March 31st of 2020, we lost 100% of our clients. And so what does that mean for you, your image, your worth? And I always thought I was bigger than that. I thought I was better than staying in bed all day. I thought that that was for suckers. I thought that depression was a mindset that you could just shrug off. My mom's a psychiatrist, so this is a shame, right? I thought that this was something that you could choose to not be depressed. Let me tell you something. It's not a choice in this thing. You can't choose the cards that you're dealt. What you can choose is how you handle those cards, what you do with that. If you're going to build a TP of a house, because all I had was 2 cards, okay? One could stack against another. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have a strong force or emphasis underneath me to be able to really build that foundation back, but I had moxie and I had courage, and I had to dig really deep, and it took a long time to find all of those elements to really build those things back up again, but you can do it. And I think that if you go into any venture understanding that it has the probability to fail, and that is all of the cards, you know, to use the card analogy, are stacked against you because you're just this. Every other card that builds that emphasis is standing just against you, you could fall. If you realize that moment that you go into that, you're going to be stronger than ever. You're going to be the Rocky Balboa, because you're going to say, I'm not going to let it define me. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be able to get up. I may be down for a little while. I take that time. I'm all about taking that time. We can get into a whole mental health talk if y'all want to. But take that time to understand that, but use that as a thing that really burns in your belly to make you stronger and more resilient the next time you have an opportunity. Because truly the formula for success is opportunity plus preparation equals success. But you have to be prepared, and preparation comes in the fire. Like I said, I started in politics at 23. You're not prepared for that. You can think you are, but you're not prepared for what you're about to experience. The preparation and the opportunities will equal success. You have to be prepared first. The opportunities will always come. But if you don't have that formula in complete line, you will not be successful.
Dion, I love it. I'm like, let's do it. I'm like, yes. Well, I think these are such great points. And, it made me think of a couple of things as all of you were chatting about this. I mean, one of the questions was, how long does it take? And it really just depends on where your growth mindset is and where you are on your journey. And we're all in different places based on our experiences and our backgrounds. I think what's really interesting from a cultural standpoint in our community is that, part of this idea of the fearing of a failure is because we do a great job as a community of celebrating wins, right? I mean, at Amplify, we have a celebrate the wins hashtag. It's important to celebrate those. But what we don't do enough of is celebrate the failures. And that's something that we've talked about from, just either friends, they have in other communities where on a business side, they have failure wakes, right? Where you actually put that company to bed and wish a good night, or you have those kind of conversations to talk about, the hard work and effort that founder put in to do it and how much ready they are for the next opportunity. I mean, in our world, in the startup space, the investors often say, I'd rather invest in a serial entrepreneur because they've learned from their mistakes. So I think that was an important piece of that too. And again, would you guys agree on the length of time is just relative to the person?
Yeah, completely. I think it just depends on where you are, the type of devastation, and that's the word I choose to use, that you experience. And then, really identifying what have I learned in the past that's going to help me be successful in the future. Why I keep this failure report journal is so that the next venture that I step into, I'm almost ready. And I'm not saying, and I really want to make sure that I'm clear, I'm not saying that I prepare for disaster. You know what I mean? But this is really my metrics of being able to learn from any mistakes that I've made today. You didn't stay focused. You weren't on task. These are short, very small things. You know what I mean? You were answering an email way too long that could have easily been summed up in a few characters and maybe a hashtag and an emoji. You know what I mean? Those are small things that you can say, next time be better, next time be best. So it does. It depends on the individual. It depends on the circumstance. I took my last failure that I just spoke about in March of 2020 and really looked at what I wanted to do with the next chapters of my life. I was ready to retire. I was like, hey, I'm about to be 40 in a few days, months at that time. And I was like, I'm about to reinvent myself. And the reinvention took a different detour than I was expecting. I started a tech company and an e-commerce platform that I didn't know even was in me. Okay. I was like Kela. Well, no, I was not like Kela. Kela is a savant, but I was like, I like mentoring people. I like consulting people. I like helping people to be able to scale and grow and become. And then I ended up in that same position where I'm jotting down his email address. Like, I need help. I need a mentor, you know, and I never thought that of myself. So being open to the possibility of what can be, being open to the idea that this is life. We don't get to decide what happens tomorrow. We didn't summons this ice storm that we're experiencing today. None of us would have wished this, right? We would have wished for sunny days and cloud in beautiful skies. But because we have it, what are we going to do with today that's going to make it great? It's a choice.
I love it. Kiana, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so just a few things. I think that paying attention to like, where did your idea of what failure is come from, and unlearning that. Because why do I have this negative mindset around failure, or that I should not be failing? Because it's a natural part. I think that honestly, failing is essential to success, because you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, and then you can do it better. But also, as far as like how long it takes, you know, when Kela talked about, you know, his first company failed and then he learned that he needed to strengthen his network, I think that that's important too, because your tribe, so to speak, are the people who are going to circle around you within those failures and help you to shift your perspective during the times that you feel like you can't. So, and they're also the ones who are going to be saying your names in rooms that you're not in. And I think that, you know, and I would love, Dion, if you would speak a little bit to that, because I remember when you and I bumped into each other and you were telling me about like, oh, my company failed and all of this. And I remember going back to a co-working space and I'm like, okay, so I saw Dion and we're doing all of these things and why is she not a part of it? Like, all right, you know? And so I think that they are also the ones who will help you shift your perspective during the times that you feel like you can't, because it is natural for you to fail and sit in it for a minute. You know, sometimes there's going to be those failures that hit a little harder than others, and that's okay. So I think that making sure that you have a strong network around you is going to be important as well.
Absolutely love that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up about the tribe, because I think one of the ways I would answer the question about how do you work on growth mindset, I'm like, surround yourself with people that have it. And realize it's a process to get there. And it's turning can't into like not now, or haven't had the ability to yet. You know, it's changing those negative words that we use even if inside of our heads into something positive. And that's what changes it. And again, yeah, the tribe, people around you, if you have a bunch of folks that are positive, that you're going to be positive too. I love that. I think we did a great job covering kind of that piece and the self-worth. You know, and I think the one question that someone had about helping those around you, I think the one thing I would add to that is that, you know, as entrepreneurs, we know we see the world in a different way. And so sometimes we're not as conservative as others might be. So a lot of times it's understanding what they're really afraid of in that failure piece and seeing how you can mitigate that. And instead of trying to chew off swallow the whole elephant, take a bite at a time with that person and help them get to that place. But I have another question I'm throw out for you all. That was such a great conversation. And Dion, mental wellness is a part of all of this, right? We know that.
Yeah.
A good question here is, could we talk about how to trust your instincts enough to keep going when others think your idea might not be a good one?
You know, this one is one that I'm dealing with right now personally. And I heard Kela, and I was raised really uniquely. You guys can imagine. My mom was going through med school when I was in the 10th grade of high school. So at this time we were like dictating her papers and all these types of things. So I got like this real like psychological brain that I did not sign up for, because I'm a creative through and through and through. However, I heard him say, this is your psychology hat. I heard him say, you give yourself 18 months and then you give yourself this buffer, right? And it's because we don't want to give up. He said that because the idea of actually giving, even though you set a time, you said, I'm going to give myself 18 months to find this success, right? But then you give yourself an additional X amount of time to actually just verify if it's actually going to succeed or not. And the reality of it is that you, to thine own self be true. You have to know that it's needed. I haven't knocked on the door. I haven't done the things that I need to do. And I've really started developing the idea of creating my goals in 3-month spurts and really living a 12-week year, so that I can understand if I've actually done everything I could do in this amount of months. Measuring that time, and I talked a little bit about measuring as my most honest form of metric to understand if I'm doing something well or ineffectively, but measuring how effective you are in that time, and then just being honest to it. You've done it. Did you try? Yes, because look at what you've just done. You have the empirical data now to be able to look back and say, you did that, you tried this, and even though your gut may say there's a little bit more, then give space for the gut room, but then be willing and honest with yourself to say it just didn't work. And everything that you have, every idea, every one of us, I love this commercial. What is it? I can't remember her name all of a sudden. Gosh, the owner of Spanx. Who is she? Sarah?
Yeah, her. Yeah.
Her, the billionaire, jillionaire, right? She said, every one of us have a $1 billion idea inside of us. It just has to be birthed. And that makes us believe that we have to hold on to that one idea. But what you've learned, what you've experienced in this one that's failing, may be the thing that you need. And just, I hate Kela's gone, we're like bigging him up, right? But it could be that one thing that you needed to lean into, the next idea that is going to actually make you the billionaire that you seek, or the influencer, whatever it is that, again, whatever success means to you. But you have to be true to yourself. Check your gut. Measure yourself, and then be true to that. And don't lie to yourself. Don't say I'm going to do it in 6 months. Don't say I'm going to do it in 18 months, and then make yourself the liar. If anybody can be truthful and honest to yourself, it should be you. You never tell yourself lies. You never are dishonest and unfair and unfaithful to yourself. So start that today. Make that a practice that you do, is that I'm going to be honest with myself. And if this isn't something that is working, if it's something that doesn't bring me joy, we could talk about that for 3 hours, then decide I'm going to get rid of it. This is something that doesn't serve me anymore, and be okay with it. Find that okay.
Love it.
I love this question, Janet. How do you trust your instincts to keep going when others don't think you have a good idea? So I'm the newbie to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I have not been in the game as long as all of these other great folks. And my intro into it was actually working for someone else before accidentally starting my own. And I remember having holiday season with my family. So I was fresh into this startup world. I had just started my own company also, and it's Thanksgiving. And a cousin comes from out of town, and they say, "Oh, what are you doing now?" And I was like, "Yeah, I work for a startup. And then I just started my own company also." And they looked at me and they said, and this was the year that I turned 30. And they said, "Oh, that's so nice, but you should probably think about getting a real job soon." And it was interesting to me because what does that mean, right? So remembering your why are you doing this in the first place? But also understanding that no one else is gonna understand because it's not their vision. So it's not for them to understand. And this particular cousin, because I know how they measure success, they were oblivious to the fact that I made just as much money as one of their children and more money than the other. I was happy. I loved what I did every single day. I now had freedom of time to work from anywhere before COVID ever hit. And I was learning. I felt like I was in Entrepreneurial University, and most people who know me know I'm a forever student. If I could have just stayed a college student for the rest of my life, I wouldn't have. That's just, I am a forever student. I like to learn. And so it was I'm living in my career everything that I could dream of. And so just understanding that like your vision is yours, and remembering your why, and understanding that honestly, most people are not going to understand your vision. And I think that that's very important to also keep in mind, because as you grow and you scale and you start pitching to investors and things like that, there's going to be so many no's because they might not understand why what you're doing is important, or it might not be important to them or in alignment or what have you. So making sure that you remember that, because remember, Kela's first company is now essentially what Uber Eats is. And there's so many investors, I'm sure, who are like kicking themselves in the butt, like, tag, we could have had this years ago, right? So they are not, it's not for them to understand. So as long as you understand and you're clear about why you're doing what you're doing, that's really all that matters.
Well said. I think about this quite a bit too. First thing is, I always like to ask why. Like, why do you think I shouldn't do this. Why do you think this is a bad idea? And usually they don't know. Usually it's because, again, going back to this word we're using as constant theme, it's fear-based. They can't imagine doing it, like trying this thing or exploring this idea where there is a good chance of failure on the other side of it. And so typically what I find out on those questions is that it's pretty surface, where they're like, because they just can't put themselves in your shoes. So the other piece I always say is look for the trends and the advice. If one person tells you that, not that they're wrong, but that's one data point. If 5 people tell you that, might be a time to kind of explore it a little bit. But they're definitely, throughout history, we are littered with the amount of kind of people that really were trailblazers and went against the, everyone else saying it wasn't going to work and made it work. I mean, look at things with SpaceX now, Elon Musk and all these different things. No one thought we would have rockets that could ship and then come back and land themselves. So, I think that's an important piece. And again, just ask why on that. Let me see. I think I just got a new message. See if we have a question. Oh, okay, Tony, thank you. So, we have, Tony, I know you're still with us. It is, I think we got 7 minutes left. I want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time. I could definitely ask them more questions. The 3 of us could probably talk about this for another hour without a doubt and dive into it. I think the important thing we wanted to make sure we share is that this isn't for the faint at heart, right? Understanding failure and failing forward is something that you have to train yourself to do. I think as a society, we've made it very difficult to look past that, though oddly enough, as a country, we have the most flexibility to be risk averse. And so I think that failing forward, learning from that doesn't always mean like you just took a good nuggets. It's how do you employ that going forward? So, but Tony, do you have anything else you want me to say, or do you want me to wrap us up?
No, I think you can go ahead and wrap us up. This has been so fascinating. I am so grateful to all of you for your insights. But yeah, say what you need to say. I say if you want to plug, do some quick plugs for yourselves, please do at the end here.
Well, I tell you what I'd love is if each of you want to kind of give like a parting statement, anything that you would like to say. Dion, I'll start with you if you want to sign off in any certain way and plug the multiple things that you're working on. I know there's a lot.
Yep, I got a list in my mind. So if you guys don't mind, please make sure you subscribe to the Failure Report. It is our podcast where we talk about being a successful failure. Also follow us on the Ambition Planner. I mentioned briefly living a 12-week year. I've created a product called the Ambition Planner that helps individuals, professionals, and entrepreneurs succeed their most ambitious dreams in the next 90 days with a plan. And then lastly, actually 2 more things is that Marta Maria Miranda Straub and I, who is my wonderful mentor, have a podcast called Leading in Color, where we talk about being leaders of color and what that looks like as she's a 65-plus-year-old woman, as me as a 40-year-old woman being leaders in this community. It is a very local centered podcast that speaks to individuals in this area. And then I have a venture that is powered by Google called Pivot. That is spelled PVT, and we are a professional wellness marketplace that will be pitching really soon and doing a lot of scaling and fundraising and all the things that make me feel nervous and sweaty in my armpits. But I'm super excited about launching a place where professionals can find the help that they need and that they deserve to be successful in their next life. So again, the Failure Report, listen to my podcast. Buy the planner at theambitionplanner.com. I'm actually going to leave you a 10% off code in the chat. Follow us and sign up on Pivot. That's spelled PVT. icanpivot.pvt.com. And then listen to our podcast with Marta Maria Miranda Straub and I called Leading in Color. I'm going to leave it all in the chat because I talk really fast. I'm going to leave it all there.
and don't forget, find the interview with Kela on the Failure Report.
Yes.
Let's not forget that one.
Please do.
Kiana, how about you?
Yeah, but Dion, we totally can tell that you do a podcast because the whole radio thing, you have it all done. You're so great at it. I'm going to have to get in the mirror and practice now. But yeah, so if you're an entrepreneur looking for help, or if you would like to participate in programming that is geared towards entrepreneurs and founders, then you can check out amplifylouisville.com to see more events like this, to participate in the community, or you can email me, Kiana at amplifylouisville.com. I will put it in the chat because I'm sure you do not know how to spell my name. And then if you work for a company or know of a company that can use diversity, equity, and inclusion training, fun, interactive, but very, very, very valuable training that builds company culture, then you can check out the elephant in the room at eitrworkshops.com.
Great. Well, again, I really appreciate both of you. I'm fortunate to get to work with Kiana, you very closely, and Dion in the ecosystem. This is the kind of positive force we need for our, not just our startup community, but our community at large. You know, I think Kiana mentioned about Amplify, so the plug's been there, but happy to help you if you're building a business. And, you know, Tony, thank you for the opportunity for us to share a little bit about our failures and how we should celebrate them going forward.
Yes, thank all of you. Thank those of you who showed up to watch and enjoy this for us. If you didn't get any of the things in the chat, I'm sure Dion and Kiana and Larry will email me those, and then I will make sure that you get any information that you need. I do want to plug next week for this failure course. We have Dr. Paul Salmon. It falls right in the middle of the Olympics. So he's going to be talking about sports failures. And as we know, athletes deal with this on a daily basis, the idea of winning and losing. And so that should be fascinating. And we'll just keep going. We're going to take it apart in many, many ways. So thank you guys so very much.